Hey, everybody. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas and Happy Kwanzaa, everybody. Bringing back the Oakland City Auditor, my friend Michael C. Houston. Honored to have you here, sir.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you. I'm glad to be here.
thank you. And I'd like for you to talk with us again about there's two seminal reports you issued recently. The first having to do with the police. And I'd like you to talk about that with my viewers and you drill down on that a little bit.
Got it. Yeah, I think so. Right now, we are finishing up on an audit of the police oversight agencies. So, the Police Commission, Community Police Review Agency, um, and our Inspector General's office. But I, that is still under development. We're wrapping that up. On October 8th, I think that's when it was, we published an audit report that summarized the results of our audit of the police department's response times to emergency calls for service. So we're talking about 911 calls. In Oakland, all the 911 calls are first fielded by the police department's communications center. So this audit really focused on the timeliness of the department's handling of those calls. And we found a lot. It's a really data rich environment. There's dispatch data that we were able to bring to bear. And we were also able to analyze data from other jurisdictions in California that are similar to Oakland in terms of the calls that they receive, the population size, the mandate in terms of the services they have to provide, emergency response. So we compared Oakland against industry standards and these other cities, right? Fresno, um, Anaheim, Long Beach, San Francisco, Sacramento. Um, did I say San Francisco? Well,
Yeah, you did. Just said
there
San
was
Francisco. Yeah.
7 other jurisdictions. I better not try to try to name them from the top of my head, but they are in the audit report. And what we found was that the police department's responses to emergency calls for service were below the standards set by our um, the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, and was slower. Our responses were slower than all of the 7 peer cities as well.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow. All
so
of them?
than all of them, and we also found that um, there's a real deviation in terms of the response times depending on the hour of the day. So we're supposed to be, obviously, the faster you pick up the phone and process calls for service, the better. We were less timely during certain parts of the day than we were in others. So basically, and we also we know that the dispatch roles. So the people responsible for picking up the calls and dispatching police to scenes. We know that we've had some vacancies in the police communication center going back years. But so we knew we need more folks. So that's one of the big causes. But the other thing is we can allocate our staffing resources to align with the demand for service, right? So when historically there have been a lot of calls for service, we can assign staff to be available during those times. And so that was a recommendation we made to use all this data to our advantage, right? Um, by assigning staff to the call taker and dispatch roles when they're most needed.
Mm-hmm.
We also found that when callers who don't speak English, their calls, um, there's even a bigger delay, right? They face big delays in time matters when we're talking about emergency calls or service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No.
But we don't have enough bilingual staff in our emergency communications center to be able to um, provide services to people calling 911 who speak, particularly like the big three languages are um, Spanish,
Hmm.
and then we have our Chinese languages, Mandarin and Cantonese,
Hmm.
spoken Mandarin and Cantonese. Um, we have a lot. There are over 10,000 folks in Oakland for whom that's their primary languages, and we don't have enough people with that language, those language competencies, to be able to provide reliable translation services in house all day and every day. We rely on an interpretation service by the state, and interpretation just takes a lot longer than having someone who can speak those languages from our, from our communication center directly.
Just a quick clarification. You also mentioned, or maybe forgot to mention English, because someone listening to that, I heard, or maybe you did say English, but I thought you heard also said Cantonese, Chinese, Mandarin, and Cantonese are two within that, right?
Right. So maybe, yes. So we have English. So we have English. We have to be able to provide service to folks who speak English,
Hmm.
a timely service. And then we have a city policy that requires that for languages that are spoken by at least 10,000 Oaklanders, that
Hmm.
we provide the same level of service to those folks that we do for folks who speak English. But yes, English is the language that we also must provide timely.
And that's also by law, right? We have to do that by law. In other words, provide services to other languages if they are, or is that our way of dealing with a complex um, polyglot society? I mean, but does the state government say that we have to do it that way, or shouldn't it, or does the federal
Yeah,
government?
that's a good question. The criteria we used was our own like city of Oakland
Hmm.
rules around that, and it, it's a very specific standard. And because it was such a specific standard, that the city ought to be giving be just as timely and provide just as quality of a service to folks who speak um, Mandarin, Cantonese, and Spanish as they do with English speakers. So we use that as our guiding criterion. But yeah, there is a legal responsibility to be able to provide services to everyone who lives in the
So
city.
that's in our charter, which basically we are a home rule city. So
Yeah,
we rule.
charter city.
Yeah, we rule out.
Mhm.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
But my oh, go ahead with your report. I thought you were going to probably say more than that, but it's what.
So we made a few recommendations around that, around being able to provide timely service, and both of the findings that I talked about, whether it be the timeliness and just picking up and processing 911 calls, and being able to provide a timely service to people who speak languages other than English. Those are we made several recommendations addressing those two issues, and that's mainly around the calls, so the calls to service. But our last finding was about our overall responses, and that in which affects other calls to service as well, right? So we have these really old beat configuration in Oakland, where we have two bureaus, one for the western part of town and one in the eastern part of town.
Hmm.
So we had the police administration building over here on Broadway, and that's kind of like the hub for the western borough. I think BFO one, and then we have the one over at Eastmont, which is the hub for the eastern borough. And the response times
That
for
was at Eastmont Mall, right? At one point, or was it?
yeah, and it's still there.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and we have the beats for those two geography. We have two boroughs and we have 6 beat areas, and then the beats within those different areas. And what we found was that those beats can use some updating. Um, because while the overall calls for service in those areas roughly the same in the west part of town and the east part of town, the makeup of the calls are different, with the eastern part of town seeing more calls that involve violence
Mm.
or the right then and require longer encounters with the police responders. And as a result, because the eastern part of town, the police are spending longer on those calls, the priority two calls, which are the ones that require a local response to, so like the beat officers assigned to a beat will respond to the priority two calls, which could lead to violence or something that had just occurred, versus a priority one call, which is like immediate threat to life and safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's more priority one calls and violence related incidents in East Oakland, the priority two calls are much slower, are responded to much slower in the eastern part of town than in the
Hmm.
western part of town.
Hmm. Is it that, not having seen the numbers, are the number of staff east and west the same, or is there more east as you would think because of the call volume?
That's exactly the problem right now. The beats, like right now, they're the staffing is allocated by the beats, but there's the number of resources are too equal. They don't reflect the demand for the service. So East
Hmm.
Oakland needs more um, officers to provide the same level of service, because the nature of the calls are different.
So it's really an allocation problem.
Mhm.
In other words, I mean, that's like that's a managerial 101 thing, right? I mean, go back to planning school and public management courses and everything. They talk about allocation, and they even have microeconomic models for that sort of thing that are like 47 years old, older than that. And we're still dealing with something that we could actually have modeled out a solution for a long time ago.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Yeah, like to your point, it's such a data rich environment that's the real good news, right? We know, and in the report, and I'm not going to get into level specifics here because I don't want to misquote something, but
Sure.
we were able
Yeah.
to calculate the amount of time, or estimate the amount of time that officers are need to address certain kinds of calls, like and we have all that historical data, so you could empirically show how many more officers would be needed to provide the same level of service um, for East Oaklanders as for West Oaklanders. That said, it's 9 minutes citywide to respond to calls for service. So that's lower than ideal anyway citywide. That's for priority one calls, right? But then these disparities, disparities are that's not a great thing to have, these wild disparities based on where one
Right.
lives.
Hey, would the problem be solved by having a partially volunteer force to take just, I mean, it's only call specific?
That's an interesting question. Like when we designed our audit, we didn't really go there.
Yeah,
We
right.
were, but yeah, I don't know.
Because some of the, Auditor Houston, some of these problems that I'm listening to take me back to when I was applying to grad schools and I visited the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. That was 1985. And I remember a couple of people who were focusing on public sector economics, is what we called it, right?
Mhm.
And this allocation problem you and I are talking about was things they're focusing on then. And I'm just shocked that 40 years later, I hate to say that, dang. But hey, I
What
am
is
Zenny
this?
62. I was born in 62, so there you go. Uh,
Oh,
But we're not using them. And I'm thinking, what are we doing? I mean, and I'm just saying in general, I expect an answer from you because you're telling us about what you found. And I'm waiting and now I'm more interested to find out what else you found so I can be taken back to my Kennedy School of Government interest before I discovered that Berkeley was better. Go Bears.
There you go. Go Bears. I went to grad school at UC Berkeley
Where?
in
Goldman?
public policy.
Go see Goldman School. Goldman
Yes.
School was one of the 3 schools established. I think it was by Westinghouse or something like that. And there was the Kennedy School. There was the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Policy at Princeton, I think. And there was the Goldman School at Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And so basically what I'm talking about was also familiar at the Goldman School at the time, and I would also guess today, why Harvard at the time. I think that had something to do with whatever it had to do with. I was basically drawing back to Berkeley, and I got a better result. Oh, part of it was an interview I had with Avis Vidal there that didn't go well. And I'll tell you why it didn't go well briefly. I flew into Cambridge with my mom. We got a hotel. And was very excited for the meeting. We waited 20 minutes and there was a woman there who was also a student being interviewed. But when Professor Vidal came in, she spent another 20 minutes exclusively talking to her about mutual friends they had in England. And near the end of that 20 minute of blah, 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 I said, well, hey, am I getting a chance to say anything? And at that point, I thought, yeah, I want to come here.
Oh.
Yeah, that did it.
The power interviews go both ways, right?
Yeah. No, because I thought, I wasn't as prone to saying things were racist then, but I did. And I thought, hey, is this because I'm black? And I did make an issue of it later. Didn't have that problem by Cal. Cal was #1 on the wait list. And K-Bach told me that I was brought in because they felt that I had a unique intellectual capability that would enrich the program.
Wow.
So
there you go. It all worked out.
Yeah, it sure did. And then City of Oakland hired me from there as an intern, So, but I was steeped in, among other things, macroeconomic analysis of allocation. And that's what we're talking about allocation. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like we're not even doing it. And maybe we should just farm it off to the schools.
well, it's a particularly important. It's particularly important now because the city doesn't have a bunch of money to throw at the problems, right? So we have to really make the best use of what we have, and that's one of the things I'm proudest about with this audit is, the recommendations are within this context of, we don't have enough resources, but given that, what can we do to improve service delivery for Oaklanders? I mean, it'd be great to be able to just hire so many more dispatchers and police officers, but that wouldn't be immediately actionable, right? So, it was interesting with with the beats being outdated and it having an impact on our priority 2 calls. Priority 1 calls, which is like something imminent. Somebody's kicking in my door. Somebody is, there's a life and safety threat going on right now. It was interesting because what we found was the hills, right? The response times for those kinds of calls was slower in the hills than in the rest of the city. Why? So where citywide, it was average of 9 minutes. Many of those beats in the Oakland Hills were averaging the medians were between 16 and 17 minutes. And it, probably due to the geography, right? Just in the terrain.
Or maybe that you don't have a Hill area response office.
But you know what's interesting? Well, oh, you're saying for there to be another kind of like
Exactly. Yeah.
like bureau for
Yeah.
that part of town.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
if they reconfigured the beats, which was our recommendation, then they'd be able to reconfigure all this, right? I mean, then maybe one of the results would be for them to make that kind of reconfiguration.
Yeah. Because I would think maybe it would allow for use of, I don't know how we get these mobile units going, but my point is, will they will someone custom design mobile units for us so we can have a mobile response unit that goes into the hills, like maybe five of them, you know, something like that. Um, and
One of the short-term solutions that we identified too is that the police department should activate the GPS within the patrol cars, so that the patrol car or the officer closest to
Mhm.
um, a scene can be dispatched, right? So priority one calls, the response can be from anywhere in the city, and it's the practice to dispatch the closest officer. But the dispatchers don't necessarily know where the closest who the closest officer is or
Right.
where
Yeah.
that is because the GPS isn't activated.
Huh.
So that was our recommendation. I believe the last recommendation, um, and I really hope that that one is implemented because it's really easy. Just turn on the GPS.
Yeah.
But we've been told that that's subject to meet and confer negotiations with the POA.
So of the range of recommendations you all have made, which ones have been at the adoption phase? Well, it's okay. It's green lit, and it's either going on now or it's a matter of time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and all of them, I will say. So we attach the city administration's responses to our audits to the back of the audit reports. So and that's the case for this audit too. So we made 10 recommendations. The police department and the city administration at least partially agree to all of them, and we've included their action plan and the department within the city responsible for implementing the recommendation and the completion date. Right. So some of them are harder to complete than others, but they have said they have committed to implementing all these recommendations. The one that's the easiest, I think, and just based on what they've reported
Mhm.
was probably um, the one involved. We have a recommendation. Uh, so there's a non-emergency line, which is very important because it gives people an alternative to get service from the city that doesn't bog down 911.
Hmm.
But that line, the non-emergency line, did not provide telephonic messages in Mandarin, Cantonese, and Spanish, so it wouldn't be available to callers who speak those languages. And so the police department identified December 2025, which is the month we're in now, for implementing that. So, and that's a super low hanging fruit. Just provide a telephonic greeting that offers services in those languages, but you have to use those languages to be able to offer the services.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
That's a
December 2025.
right.
That's what they identified for the target date. So
That's a good idea. And there was a police report, but there was another report you issued too, right?
the kids first. So there's this act that was passed back in 1996,
Yep.
Kids First Oakland Fund for Children and Youth
Hmm.
Act.
Yep. That's right.
There's two
When I
requirements.
worked for
One,
Elihu,
that was back then when you were on staff.
I was hired as Elihu's economic advisor December 7th of 1995.
Hmm.
And in 1999, I was then transferred to um, economic development as a consultant, and I wound up heading the effort to bring the Super Bowl to Oakland. We lost to Jacksonville.
Hmm.
Yeah, we lost at the fall 2000 NFL owners meeting in Atlanta on the third ballot. Oakland was one of three finalists, the other two being Jacksonville and Miami. and it uh, it got us it was one of the most news generating efforts we'd ever done in our history, especially when the commissioner on after May 10th. Well, first we had a meeting. We were invited to meet with the commissioner on May 10th of 2000 uh, to present our case for to host the 2005 Super Bowl. Afterward, the commissioner then released about a month later um, a press release stating that the finalists for the right to host the 2005 Super Bowl were Jacksonville, Miami, and Oakland. And boy, the sports world went ape. And Oakland went ape because a lot of people, including Jane Bruner, who told me personally, he was District 1 council member, she told me personally, auditor, she said on September 16th of 2000, she told me, we were betting against you. Her words. She said, you surprised us. We were betting against you. And then somewhere here, there should be a book about why Oakland lost sports. And I think, not to belabor the point, but it does seep into other areas of how we do things. There's a lack of love for the city to a point where in the 21st century, okay, we don't work together as people. And I think as it became more expensive to live in Oakland, um, people who worked in Oakland were more concerned about maintaining what they had and paying for it. And I understand why. And I can name personal conversations with people I've had who are council members and da da da, da who made career changes or made changes based on having kids and everything else. Justified. I'm not saying it's not justified. But what happened was the kind of oneness that we had in the 80s and the 90s that caused Oakland to reset itself and get the Raiders back. That oneness that was required was blown away in the 21st century, and the key example of that was in I would say the late 90s and the run up to the 2000s, and I experienced it personally. Uh, People telling me, one guy worked every morning I go to work, he'd say, "You never get the Super Bowl to Oakland." This is a guy who was paid by Oakland, trash worker, you know. And after the first 4 days of it, I got tired, and uh, every morning I went to him and I said, "Super Bowl Oakland." I went on a rant, like it just I don't know where it came from, but I was pissed, and it made it my mission to make him say Super Bowl Oakland, and finally he did say it. Um, and I I could tell you about people who tried to pull the rug out from under me. There was an intern said, "Well, oh, she begged me to help her when I was setting up the 10K program, and she did a great job. I had no idea who she was. She later turned out she worked for Janice Howley. She was an intern, um, and then she came back, and I ignored her, and for 3 weeks, and she was pestered the crap out of me, and I said, okay, look, I want you to clear your voicemail. I want you to pretend." To be a Cal student because I need San Diego's bid book. And then she came to me, so I need $60 for the bid book. And I said, oh, no problem. Gave her a check. And then lo and behold, she got it. She got it. Because I had I had nothing. I was flying blind, right? She got it. And so then I remember I had a meeting scheduled with Robert Bob, which was to be the 14th of May. And this is 1999. And that Friday, that week, that month, I went to her and I said, "Hey," just instinctively, I said, "Hey, the book." She goes, "Oh, I've got it." I said, "Yeah, yeah, where is it?" She goes, "It's at my house." I said, "Why is it at your house?" And she says, "I don't know." I said, I need my book." She says, "Well, I don't know how I'm going to get it to you." I'm saying this purely, purely aware of where I'm saying it right now. Okay. Okay. Um, and I said, "You got to be kidding me." And I said, "Well, I'll come by your house. I'll come by your house and get your book. Where do you live?" She goes, "I don't want you at my house." I'm saying, I need to get my book. Now I'm like this far away from her. All right. And this far away, like further than that, like all the way. I'm standing up. She's sitting down at her cubicle, at her table. Okay. I'm way back outside her cubicle. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I almost went, dang, like that on the riser. And I went to Clint Bolden, who was the director of economic development. And I said, Clint, I got a problem. I don't know what's going on. And I told the whole story. And he goes, and then he doesn't bring me in the office, but he brings her in the office. And then she comes out and he says, here's what I'm going to be tomorrow, which was a Saturday. It was a Friday. I got sick to the point of like upchucking. So Monday I walked in, Clint Bolden walked at the large administration building on the third floor. When you go into CETA, there's this door you go in, and it's to this day there's an office, kind of check in there. All right, and unless they've really remodeled it, which they haven't. And so I was sending faxes to Jim Steek at the NFL. Clint goes whizzing by me, doesn't even say hello. The Lord put this in my head. I said, Clint, you have my book? I heard a bam. He slammed this door. The Lord told me he had my book. So on that basis alone, I knocked on his door. I said, Clint, I need my book. I got a meeting with Robert at 2:00. I need my book. I knocked semi-regularly for about 22 minutes because my cubicle was like right next to his door. Do you realize at the end of 22 minutes, he opened up the door and said, here's Zinni. There are things just as important as your Super Bowl, and gave me the book. I was right. The Lord did that. Think about that, okay? So I go and have my meeting with Robert. Robert put me in charge officially of heading the Super Bowl at that point, because prior to that, Sally Roach was the head of SMG, a stadium management group. Well, not the head of a stadium management group. Stadium management group was heading the Coliseum. She was representing them. Glenn Mon was the president of SMG in Philadelphia, Spectacor Management Group. Unbeknownst to Sally, I had a bunch of conversations with him. Sally, in our first meeting regarding going after the Super Bowl, where I was there along with my friend Mike Silver, who's my friend to this day, and Monty Poole, because I'm one of my press posse friends, involved, said on the speaker, and about 18 people in the room, including Dina McClain, who was the head of the Coliseum. She was the executive director at that time. And Steve McFadden, who was the architect for Coliseum, was on my right. And so Sally says, Glenn, Zinni says that the host committee's budget's $5 million. That's not right, is it? And Glenn, on the speaker, with his chain-smoking cigarette voice, says, Zinni is right. And she turned 3 shades of red. Okay? So then I needed the drawings. And I couldn't find them. No one knew where the drawings for the Coliseum were. The Coliseum. So if I'm talking to the fire marshal, right, we're stuck. All right. So I couldn't believe it. Robert Bob said that, and then they said that Steve McFadden stole the drawings. That's what Dina McClain and Sally Roach said. I said, I'm not believing this. All right. So I made all kinds of calls. It was the pre-internet age, right? Finally, the next 2 days later, I got a call from a guy named Monir Habaloo of HNTB, which built the east side of the Coliseum. Says, Zinni, I've got your drawings. And then he called me back 4 hours later and says, Sally Roach says you have to go through her to get them. I went, fuck. I got off the phone, went right to Robert Bob's office because he was city manager at the time, now our new city administrator because of the changeover and how he did government. And I said, you need to fire her. I said, you fire her, I'm going to ABC, and I'm going to have a press conference. I'm going to tell everybody what the blank is going on. All right? So then, come to the May 14th meeting, he did a switcheroo. He said, Sally, you report to Zinni. Okay. Yeah. And then I got a call from Jess Gonzalez of Equal Employment Opportunity. There was a complaint about you. I said, what? He goes, yeah, well, violence in the workplace. I said, excuse me? Violence in the workplace? Yeah, some girl says that she was working with you on the Super Bowl. I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, were they trying to set me up or something? I told him the whole story, and he goes, and he and Greg, uh, Greg, who used to be over at economic development, they both told me to file a complaint against her. So I did. And so I gave the intake, and they were like, well, you asked her for a date. I said, I didn't ask her for a date. I took her to lunch to say thank you for getting the bid book. I said, do you realize how valuable it is to have somebody's bid book for the Super Bowl? You're trying to bid for the Super Bowl. I said, and then I said, no, I mean, she and I were not going out at all. In fact, I said there was somebody else I was dating. And I said, yeah, she was, and I said this no wanting to test what was really going on. And I said, yeah, she's white with blonde hair. That was the girl I was going out with, and she's in a whole nother department. So Margaret, who was doing the intake, had told me in 1994 she was jealous of me having a column for the Montclarian. Okay. Same person doing the intake for Jess. Okay. And I told Jess about this. Okay. And so she writes in her evaluation about my story and everything that I had a problem with black women. I said, why? Because it turns out I'm dating somebody white, and I wasn't dating the girl that you thought I was going after at all, and she was trying to steal my bid book and make me look bad for Clint Bolton. Is that the reason? Those are the reasons why we don't have sports, because we have too many people who work for the city who screw around. They try to make life harder for other people who really care. And that's the untold story. All right? It is the untold story. You know, who cares if I talk like a white guy, or what I do personally, or what my personal life is, okay? Which, you know, truth be told, like my personal life, my business life were like that. You know, if I was going out, like I remember I went to Balboa once, cafe in the city, Jerry Brown walks in, he's mayor. He goes, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm trying to find donors for our Super Bowl bid, which is true. He goes, good idea. I said, yeah, you could help. You know, he's around telling visitors from China that we don't have enough hotels and that the Super Bowl shouldn't be here. True story. Okay. This is on my watch as Super Bowl hit. It was so bad that we had our rehearsal. And there are two people whose names I won't mention, but would not say their lines for our rehearsal before the NFL owners. I was this close to crying. Because by that time it was the fall of 2000, and we were in Atlanta to give our, presentation. I thought, you got to be kidding me, man. And as I'm walking out, Sue Robachek and Jennifer Gonzalez from the NFL are watching me, and they said, Zenny, we feel for you. Because they saw the whole thing play it out. Jerry Brown had some person call the NFL asking them questions. Jim Steed called me back, who is the NFL senior vice president for special events, okay, and said that the city of Oakland is having somebody call us, asking us questions we know that you already gave them the answers to, because I was keeping them apprised of every single thing that I did, everything. The city is not right.
When is the book coming out?
That's a good question. I need to write. It needs to be a movie. I need to write the book. I tried to find somebody to get it right with me. It needs to be written, because the city. On top of all that, I found out before our presentation on the 19th of October of 1999 at the Joint Powers Authority meeting. The city had been having meetings. The mayor and the chairman of the Joint Powers Authority, who was also the chairman of the city council, which was Ignacio de la Fuente, by his own admission, says, we've had meetings about this sponsorship idea you came up with, and we don't see how it's going to work, On August 25th of the same year, Michael, I'm on a plane coming back from a Super Bowl workshop. My idea for sponsorship was, if you have the money as an NFL recognized sponsor, you could buy the Coliseum East Side for $30 million, have control of all 125 suites there. We would put your logo up. It will be seen by millions of people and ultimately billions on Super Bowl Sunday, okay? And for $30 billion. So of all the people I had to run into by accident on a United flight coming back from New York, headed cross country, was none other than Michael Lynch. Michael Lynch was the head of global sponsorships for none other than Visa, an NFL sponsor, tying his shoe in the same row as me. I said, Michael, this is the Lord, okay? I said, Michael. And I told him about the idea. He says, it's a great idea. That's the head of Visa sponsorships. All right? Meanwhile, Dina McClain is in a meeting with us on the 25th. Scott Haggerty's sitting next to me. He was Alameda County Supervisor. Larry Reed is sitting over here. Dean McClain's sitting over there saying, I don't get this thing called sports sponsorship. And she's the executive director of the Coliseum. All right? And then we have the nerve to wonder why sports left Oakland. There are a bunch of stories like that. Of people who don't care, who don't mind being incompetent, who just want to be in power, but they don't want to do anything or get anything done. They don't ultimately care about how the city looks. They care more about making somebody else look bad who actually cares to get things done for the city. And that's a fact.
You said that in present tense.
Yeah, because Shang did the same thing. Our former mayor, she has a presentation before the Major League Baseball, but instead of taking California Governor Gavin Newsom, her or her chief administrative officer at the time, and her project manager, which is Molly Mabry, okay, and herself. Instead of Shang doing that, she takes herself, her chief of staff, and her head of communications, and Molly. All women, and they pose like they're in Vogue or something. That's supposed to show credibility, certainty, capacity that you can build a stadium? No. No. And I made a video about it too, and I criticized them for it. No. They could have asked anybody who had any experience working with the NFL or Major League Baseball, like myself, but they didn't do that. They had names for everybody, including me. All right? No. So there's something about us as a city where we will not take ourselves seriously when it comes to getting things done. And that's the problem. That's the problem. We got to admit it, stop being that way, start taking ourselves seriously. And when we have something, it has to stop being these groups, like these little, like Oakland Sports Group has their little thing, or AESCG has its little thing, and the Coliseum Joint Powers Day wants to dissolve when it needs to stay alive to help steward along AESCG, and everybody needs to be coordinated. Instead, everybody's off doing their own thing, and they all think they have the problem, the solution. It's called frustration. I get it. It's not getting us anywhere. It's not working. And somebody's got to say something about it. I'm saying something about it right here, okay? It's a mess, Michael.
So, well, I mean, you definitely have a point of view, and based on your extensive.
I forgot this too. I wrote after I found out that Ignacio said they're meeting with this CEO group, and they didn't see how my sponsorship was going to work right on October 19th. I wrote an email to my board. I accused Jerry Brown of being racist. I said, I didn't say it like that. I said that the mayor had a hard time with anyone who is black and intellectually aggressive. I said that. And I meant it. So someone I won't name took that email and took it to Jerry, and then unbeknownst to me. And so Jerry called me in the next day and says, so let's talk about Al Davis. He didn't mention why he was really wanted to talk to me, okay? So I said, but he had never talked to me about the Super Bowl in the 2 years I was working on it until the next day after I wrote the email. All right? So he says, oh yeah, and the Sharkbar guy says, well, he put his leg on one pants at the time. We have to make with Mr. Davis. Okay? I mean, by contrast, I had Lee Steinberg, my friend of this day, fly up from Newport Beach to meet with me and the mayor. This was earlier that year in July. And we gave Jerry a 10-point set of things to, like, call the Kaiser CEO, call the Clorox CEO. He did none of those things. None of them. None of them. You hear me? None of them. None of them. And then he had his nerve to get upset when I wrote the email and said, well, you can't go to Atlanta. And Robert Bob talked to him because they needed me. You want to know how much they needed me? When I got to Atlanta, I discovered that then they had these gifts to the NFL. I had Nancy Hill, who was the head of GMO Hill Holiday, who was brought to me by Art Twain, who is the father of Mark Twain, who I went to Skyline High with. They made a BAFO, integrated circuit-based logo of our Super Bowl effort with a beautiful, ultra-modern, several book presentations volume. And beautiful. Just overall $113,000 of in-kind contribution. I was very happy to write that receipt. Beautiful stuff. So then on top of that, Nancy got Palm Computer to make 32 special Palm Pilots, one for each NFL owner. You open up, it's in Jeff Lurie's name. Jeff Lurie is the owner for the Eagles. It writes something that's got our football logo, and it was cool, man. I got another one. The late Ed McCaskey got it. Ed McCaskey is 6'7" dude, owner of the Bears. Comes over to me at the hotel, goes, young man, this is really beautiful, but I have one question to ask you. What kind of name is Xenophon Abraham? But I found out that they had taken half of the NFL owner devices and they put them over. They weren't at the Atlanta Hyatt Hotel, the Marriott. They weren't. They were at the airport in a hangar. I said, what are they doing in a hangar? So I had to call FedEx, work with them, get all those things back there. That would never have happened if Jerry had made me stay at home. Okay? I had to clean up all that crap, man. And I did it. It was so bad that we gave our presentation to Paul Tagliabue, who passed away a few weeks ago, on May 10th of 2000. I'm at the head of the table. Jerry, and Monty Poole chronicled this. Jerry showed up 20 minutes late for the meeting. He left with an hour on the clock. It took Scott McKibben, who was the publisher of A&G newspaper, to save our effort by talking about how the East Bay Business Committee could come together. When Jerry walked in, the first thing he said to Paul Tagliabue upon seeing me at the head of the table was, hey, Paul, what do you think of Zinni's cockamamie idea? Okay. Roger Goodell was in the room. Roger Goodell was then executive vice president and head of football operations. He witnessed the whole thing. So did Derek Higgins. He was head of NFL legal, sitting over here. Paul Tagliabue was sitting over there. Jerry Brown, Robert Bob, Rich Malthus, Scott McKibben, Phil Tagami. Okay. Jerry and Phil came in late. Phil and I almost had a fight at Delmonico's the night before because he got mad. He was on the port commission. He got mad that I wanted to use part of the landing fees for our Super Bowl bid. I said, it was just an idea. So then he wants me to meet Jerry. I'm thinking, okay, Jerry wants me. He's in a hotel room. I'm thinking, oh, it's great. He's here, right? Early. But it wasn't to be nice to me. I hear that you're proposing $200 million for naming rights. I said, yeah, we're going to call it corporate ABC Field at corporate XYZ Stadium. Street Smith Sports Business Journal had valued our naming rights at $80 million. We're getting our naming rights for $10 million, dude. Okay? But if you get to the Super Bowl, hey, all bets are off. Okay, you ask for what it's worth, all right? Jerry says, well, you can't have that money. And I sat there and I was thinking, oh no, it was like Steven Spielberg had this pan zoom technique, all right? And I thought, what do I do? And I thought, wait a minute, you know what? I only need 10% of the 200 million. So I was doing this quick calculation in the back of my head. I thought, hey, you can have it. I only need 10% of it. So I made Jerry Brown speechless for a good point of time. He thought he had me. He didn't have me. Because I was in the back of my mind thinking, I am not going to let you mess this up, dude. I am not going to let you fuck with this at all. No. I'm fighting for the city. Absolutely not. Ain't happening. Okay. So that was in the back of my mind. Okay.
Well, yeah, you got stories, or I shouldn't say stories. I should say you have a history.
Receipts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should put it in writing.
Yeah, I'm going to, and it's part of it. Monty started doing. I'd like to get somebody to ghostwrite it for me, rather than me just doing it myself. But just out of time, and just doing it right, and also finding somebody that has enough pedigree to get it to the right publisher so that it gets promoted the right way, because it is the central key book. It would be, as to why we lose our sports teams and what's going on with us in terms of professionalism or lack thereof, that cause us to lack the will and the initiative to finish big projects. What I'm going through is very similar to what Phil Tagami went through. All right. And with the whole Vulcan oversized terminal, the city of Oakland was partner in that. It was the city of Oakland that in part came up with coal to begin with. Yep. So, I mean, and then because Tom Starr comes through and is waving his cash around, all of a sudden everybody just fell in line behind his money. That's ridiculous, man. But that's what happened. And no one bothered to say, well, gee, is there a way that we can, technically do this to where it's zero emissions and maybe these things gets transported and then we, win with technology? Nobody wanted to hear that. Suddenly it was like the Salem witch trials. And all the council members that were involved signed off on it, and coal was right there in the document. And then they turned around and lied on it, including my god sister, Libby. And Libby knows she did. That's no way to treat people. It's no way to do things at all. And all this stuff happened in the run-up to the change from strong mayor in this different form of government. We had council manager form of government. It was less likely to happen because we were more focused on long-term planning. It was less political. You didn't have as many things that get in political way. But after that, I'll tell you this. If we had a council manager form of government, we would have, I will tell you this, the A's would have been here. Robert Bob would not have been fired for trying to get a downtown stadium at Uptown. I would have had the resources I need to work on. And the sports commission that I created, which is the only sports commission that Oakland's ever legally had, would have still been alive to this day. Instead of Jerry killing it because he didn't maintain me, and the $80,000 that Bill Claggett had set aside for me because they were also shocked that I got the city that far. It was a gift. He took $80,000 out of my doggone pocket. And he did so against the law, because it is against the law to fire somebody when they're accusing you of being racist. And that's why I'm talking about so freely about it now. I was screwed with, man, big time. As far as I'm concerned, the city owes me at the minimum $80,000 for all the shit they put me through. And that's why I started Oakland's first blog. Yeah.
Don't really know what to say to that, sir.
I didn't intend to go in that direction, but it's all about city operations.
Yeah.
It's all about auditing. It's all about why we have these problems. And behind them, there are people who care. There's somebody back there who cares, who's not being heard. There's somebody back there who has the right idea, whose idea is being ignored. And we got to stop doing this. So all these politicians, John and Ian, all these folks have to stop this thing, but they get up and it's always their idea. If you're working with a staff person, shine the light on them. If you're working with a bunch of them, shine a light on them. If you're working on something on behalf of a business person, bring the business owner with you and stop making it look like it's just you.
That is one thing that I really do appreciate about Oakland is there are a lot of community members who have strong opinions and are really committed to making things happen. So I think the city would be well served to tap into that.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to have you back again to talk about the other part of that.
Yeah, I
You know,
bet. Yeah, I do have to go now, but I am always glad to talk with you.
yeah.
Our office is always up to stuff. Our little team of 10, we keep ourselves busy. We're working on audits of illegal dumping. That should be published hopefully soon. We have our police oversight audits, and we're working on an audit of the financial management of capital improvement projects. We're going to be presenting audit recommendation follow up at the city council meeting next week. So
Hey,
lots
quick
going
question.
on over here.
How come no one ever audits? I said the same thing to Courtney years ago. How come no one ever audits the Coliseum?
Well, I mean, there's so many. You know what's interesting, Zenny, is when we ask. So first of all, in Oakland, there are a lot of things that warrant auditing, right? So I mean, there's so much that we could be potentially auditing. We have a very small team. There are a lot of specific audits that are recurring in nature that we're supposed to audit on a recurring basis, right? Like this gets first one audit, Measure Q, Measure N, Measure M, and now we have Measure NN for the future, right? There's all these audits. Oh, the Police Commission, Community Police Review Agency audit. There's so much on our plate, and so when deciding what our work plan looks like, we're considering the risks to the city. We're considering those different mandates from the city charter, the municipal code, and the legislation that gets passed. We're considering changes in service, right? We're considering things that we learned from previous audits, and there's always and then we also solicit feedback from the public and the council members and the mayor and staff here, and we look to our whistleblower hotline, like the complaints that we receive, and we get so many different things.
Mm.
So that's a
I'd
long
love
way
to hear those, man.
I mean, there's just so much. There really is a lot. So we do make it an effort to audit what matters most to Oaklanders for a particular period of time. But so thank you for the suggestion for the Coliseum, and if you want to be more specific, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I'll tell you right. I'll make it simple. Okay, the Coliseum does not have a way. It doesn't do true oversight into its activities with respect to economic development and service delivery. And the one question we all have to ask is, what is service delivery look like in the Coliseum context? The answer is service delivery should look like the number of events you have, your potential versus where you are in getting those events. So if it's sports teams, how are you doing? Not just live events, not just the arena, the whole shebang. We need to know what replacement costs new looks like in the Coliseum context. This will help AESCG too, because do you realize that right now they just had a meeting last month where they were saying, well, they didn't sign off on events for next year that were considered to be external stadium oriented. I don't know if they actually had that meeting or not. They were supposed to on the 21st of last month, okay? And so basically I'm saying, wait a minute, for the first time, because this is on camera, I said, for the first time, you're saying to me that you don't really have an organization that's managing what happens in terms of events in the stadium or anybody that might want to do one, and there's no entity that goes after them. It's just dead. So you're just gonna turn over the Coliseum to AESCG. You're not gonna ask AESCG if they have a plan, let alone the money to execute it. That's suicide. But that's where we are right now, and no one cares. I told Ray Bobbitt all the time. I said, man, the Coliseum Joint Powers Authority should stay alive. They should continue to fund it for the specific reason working with you to make sure that our face is intact while you build the business around it. Because that's what he's doing. I've been at this for 2 years, man. I've talked about this. 2 years. I said, hey, where's our plan for succession? What does it look like? Where's the pretty picture of what we expect in the future? Okay? We don't have an official one. What's worse, Michael, is that no one's asking for one. And I say, you know what? You're going to turn around 30 years from now. Someone's going to sue you all or the city for not doing its job in developing this property. And they would be right to try.
No, actually, what I hear from you is performance measurement, performance metrics,
Absolutely.
and also economic development, which is critical right now.
Yeah.
As the city struggles to identify ways to broaden and increase its revenues.
Right. Like we haven't used tax increment financing since Jerry brought it back, killed it, and it was brought back to life under SB 620 SB 628 Beal. Okay, and that was September 14th of 2015. And so and then I said to Dave Cobble, when he became vice president, we had a call April 17th of 2017 at 4:00 in the afternoon. And I said to him during that call that he was going to need to establish a tax increment financing zone to gain the money to build affordable housing. I said, because you're not going to get Howard Terminal without it. He said, any public money isn't available. I said, yes, it is. I showed him I provided him SB 628 Beal. I showed him that he had never heard of it. I showed him the documents that were written by Let's Go Oakland when Doug Boxer was trying to work to build the ballpark. The first version of Howard Terminal, as it's basically called. I have all that documents. I sent those to him. Instead of just using that he did it smartly, and they established SB 293 Skinner. That was signed into law by Gavin October 11th of 2019. That fall, the city was supposed to meet with the county of Alameda and the taxi agencies, lay out its plan and say, okay, normally we give you this, we only take 22% for our general fund, but now we're going to take all of it, and here's what we're going to do with it. We need your approval. They didn't do anything until the 27th of March of 2021, when the commissioner of baseball said, hey, what are we doing here? And then Libby said, oh, I better talk to the county. I better have these meetings. Seriously? Seriously? And I said to Libby, hey, I'd love to be your consultant. She rejected me. Molly Mayburn had no idea what she was doing. She gave a presentation. This is on video, dude. Her first presentation before the county and the public on live stream. And where's she at? She's in Hawaii on vacation. Giving it from hotel room. Not even a business office. With her kids there saying, or her kids are, it was a joke, man. This is how we disregard our city. And we let people do this stuff. Okay? It goes on and on and on and on. So you're asking, you say, why are you using present tense? I'm telling you, I'm giving you examples. This isn't how cities are supposed to be.
I appreciate your perspective.
You got it.
I mean, as an auditor, I'm taking that in.
Thank you, man. Hey, I got your ear. That's what matters. And I know you got something else to do, so I will end this stream. You don't have to do anything, Michael. I got it. Everybody, thank you for listening. This is stuff I have talked about before. Many viewers of this channel know the history. I've talked about. I cried about it. But has anyone done anything about it? Anyway, Michael, I'll talk more backstage. See ya.
Yes.
Thanks.